Hello, good morning. You're welcome once more to our lectures in philosophy of religion. As we highlighted last week, philosophy of religion has three major areas: the phenomena of religion, the God question, and the problem of evil. This time, we are dwelling on the problem of evil. Last week, we tried to introduce this area by saying the meaning of evil, the different kinds of evil, and the different formulations of the problem of evil. Of course, I mentioned that there are four major formulations of the problem of evil. Number one is the logical problem. Number two is the evidential problem. Number three is the hiddenness of God. And number four is the problem of karma and reincarnation. All these are different ways to explain why there is evil in a world created by a good God. Last week we've been able to say a few things on the logical problem, the evidential problem, and the hiddenness of God. So today, our major concern is on the problem of karma and reincarnation. Non-theistic religions, especially religions like indigenous religions in India, like Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, and many others, have tried to account for the problem of evil in the world, the nature of evil in the world and its existence, with respect to human suffering as rooted in karma and rebirth. That is, they are trying to say that one suffers as a result of karma and rebirth. The word karma is from the word Sanskrit, which is rooted in the word krit, meaning to do, or literally deed or action, what one does. Karma can also mean one's intention or motivation for a given action, or what happens to an individual. Its broader meaning, sometimes referred to as the law of karma, is the law of causation, including the results of one's action. Karma, in this way, involves causal connections linking what an individual does to what happens to them. Karma is trying to link to say that what you do reflects in what happens to you. In its popular formulations, karma or rebirth is the view that the conscious self transmigrates from one physical body to the next after death. Rebirth is saying that conscious self transmigrates from one physical body to the next after death. Each human being, every human being that is alive today, has lived former lives. Each human being has lived former lives, perhaps as another human being, or maybe even as another kind of organism. Karma refers to the entire cycle of cause and effect which governs human life. It is a cosmic law of cause and effect, action and reaction, that ensures that to every action there is a reaction, which its appropriate consequence in form of punishment or reward. Hence, the effects of one's action could be experienced here and now or in the next life, when one comes back into the world through death and rebirth. This continues until the person sufficiently purifies himself and achieves release. Thus, suffering and rebirth are the effect of one's misdeeds. The concept of karma and rebirth has several different interpretations according to context, time, period, and some philosophical schools. However, central to the different interpretations is the fact that what we do has a consequence. If one is suffering in the present world, it means the person is suffering for actions performed in the previous life. In the context of the problem of evil, karma and reincarnation seem to offer a better account of evil and suffering than does other theories. For example, it seems exceedingly unfair that one child is born healthy into a wealthy, loving family, whereas the other child is born sickly into a cruel, unloving environment. It's difficult to explain why some people from day one start their life in suffering. Some people are born sick, their parents are poor, the environments are unloving, the environment is discouraging. The environment has nothing to offer them to help them realize themselves. Whereas some are born healthy, intelligent, in a rich family with a good background. Karma explains this clearly. The child born sick, suffering in a poor family, is simply suffering the consequences of what he did in his former life. The child born healthy, happy, intelligent, and in a rich background is reaping the rewards of his good deeds in the former life. That is the way karma and reincarnation tries to explain evil. However, this theory has received various objections. One, if, according to the karmic law of cause and effect, if a person's present life circumstance are explained by the actions in the previous life, and the person's life circumstance in that life is explained by the actions in the previous life, and so on indefinitely, then the solution hoped for regarding inequalities seems not to come to an end. It ends in what we call infinite regress. If what I'm going through now is a result of what I did earlier in my former life, and what I did in that my former life is a result of what I did in the earlier former life, and that way, that means the solution, the problem that karma and reincarnation tries to solve has not been solved, because it ends up in infinite regress. Furthermore, does it really seem fair that when a person has lived a long life and dies and is reincarnated, the person must start all over again as a baby with her maturity, life experiences, wisdom and memories completely erased? So karma does not seem fair after all. How does it look like a professor, for instance, who has spent all his life reading and writing, learning different things, dies, and all his memories, all his achievements, all he has been able to gather is wiped off, and he starts life afresh? Karma in this sense is not considered by many to be fair, because it doesn't present the picture of liberation that it promises. Again, however, the initial advantage of this solution of problem is that karma again tries to preserve the role of moral agency. Moral agency is central to the problem of karma and rebirth, because our moral decisions self-determine our future experiences. That's one advantage that karma and rebirth offers. It tries to make everybody be aware. It keeps us awake that our actions have consequences. Our good actions will be rewarded either here or later, and our bad actions will be punished either here or later. That's one thing that karma that's one help it tends to offer. In fact, moral agency is central to the problem of karma and rebirth, because it shows that moral decisions self-determine our future experiences, making us responsible for our destiny. Upon further reflection, the view karma and rebirth seems to run contrary to the problem of free moral agency. For example, a man contemplating rape and murder of a woman, supposing he has done so before and has thus far not been caught, and he is considering redirecting his life by turning himself into the authorities and receiving the consequences of his actions, but just as he is in this moment of repentance, an indecently dressed woman strolls by. and his mad passions of rape comes up again. If he decides to rape the woman and does so, then on the karmic account, the woman was not completely innocent after all. Because in this sense, what the woman is suffering, the woman that is suffering rape is receiving punishment for her actions in the former life. If he decides the woman is actually paying the price for her former evil actions, in that case, the rapist is not truly free to act as he does. Because what Karma and Rebirth tries to say is that every action I perform is a consequence of actions I performed in my former life. But in this case, a man raping a woman, the woman is suffering rape because of what he did earlier. That means the rapist is not actually performing the actions. Rather, the rapist is helping the woman to receive the punishment for her actions in the previous life. Again, another problem that arises with the problem of karma and reincarnation is also the problem of moral freedom. If the rapist, in this example we gave, is deterministically carrying out justice on his victim, then it seems that he's not truly a free moral agent after all. If the rapist, in this sense, if the man raping the woman is carrying out justice on the victim, justice in the sense that the woman suffering the rape is suffering the consequence of her former action. So if the person raping her is carrying out justice, it means that the person performing the rape is not freely choosing to perform it. Rather, destiny or the will of karma is forcing him to help the woman receive the reward and receive the punishment for her former action. It is also disconcerting to affirm a moral system in which we understand rape and murdered victims to be themselves morally culpable for such acts. That's what karma brings us into. Because karma makes us to see people suffering as not just suffering, but they are receiving punishment for actions they perform. For instance, if an armed robber or an assassin comes in here now and shoots people, why the assassin is culpable for his actions, the victims of his assassination are also, according to the law of karma and rebirth, are also they suffered assassination because of what they did in their former life. In this sense, it is very disconcerting because there is no moral system in this system. As with atheistic plies to evil, karma solution may be helpful at some level, but they nevertheless leave one with less complete answers to the variety of problems and evil and suffering. Because, as you will remember again, our problem in this discourse, in this problem of evil, is to understand why there is evil in the human world. Why is there evil in the world created by a good, perfect, all-loving, all-powerful God? And karma and reincarnation is one of the attempts to explain, to show that this is why evil exists. It tries to say, in essence, that evil, suffering, trouble, pain, sickness, poverty, disease, injustice exist because all those suffering these things are reaping punishment for actions they performed earlier. Another problem that the problem of karma and reincarnation has encountered is the problem of the memory problem, which points to the utter lack of any memory traces of previous life. It is difficult. The problem of the doctrine of karma and reincarnation purports to explain every evil, every suffering and benefit of this life by prior good or bad conduct. If that is the case, then it should be also able to explain what sorts of sin a sufferer could have committed to deserve such punishment. Of course, we know that not all offenses attract equal punishment. It is not the punishment you give to someone who just slapped a fellow human being that you give to someone who killed a fellow human being. In this sense, then, karma, if karma is explaining someone's present suffering like sickness, like poverty, like disease, like barrenness and so on, as a consequence of the person's former action, karma should also be able to explain to us what the person did that requires this kind of punishment in this present life. Again, the idea of referring to events prior to one's present life throws karma into a problem of infinite regress. There is also the problem of explaining death. If rebirth is to account for all human suffering, it should be able to explain again the problems of those that are suffering innocently. There are people in different parts of the world that it appears that their suffering are gratuitous. That is, it is difficult to trace their suffering to anything from the choices they've made. And karma does not explain this. Again, to make our discussion more pragmatic, it is good to relate karma and reincarnation with the idea of ancestral causes that seem to dominate thoughts in this part of the world. Karma has some relations with the prevailing views in some parts of the world, mostly dominant in Africa, particularly in Igbo land, called ancestral causes. The idea of ancestral causes, simply stated, holds that what some ancestors did, particularly bad ones, in their lifetime, have a way of affecting the life and fortunes of their descendants negatively. It holds that, ancestral causes holds that businesses can fail, there could be marital ill luck, there could be general life setbacks and misfortunes because of causes that were provoked by the actions and inactions of our ancestors. As a consequence of this, some people never experience success. Some people never experience fulfillment or joy. It is usually from one problem or the other. Such people's lives are marked by stagnation, frustration, unfruitfulness. They seem to be always struggling with something. They are brilliant and hardworking, yet they make nothing out of it. It is believed that because their forefathers made some human sacrifices, forcefully took away someone's wife or land, meted injustice to the innocent, blocked someone else's progress, worshipped their local gods, sometimes called idols, and so on, that the progress of their descendants is affected. In a nutshell, it's trying, ancestral causes, I'm trying to link it with the idea of karma and reincarnation, trying to say, around us here, we are aware that many people tend to believe that some people's setbacks and lack of apparent progress, unfruitfulness, barrenness, marital ill luck are traceable to the causes provoked by the actions of their forefathers, their great forefathers. Again, this belief in ancestral causes is illustrated by the following story. Around the beginning of the 20th century, one Mr. E.E. Winship published studies of two well-known American families of the 19th century. His findings have been featured in many publications since that date and are well worth passing on. In his publication, Max Jukes was an atheist who married a godless woman. In their line of descendancy, some 560 descendants were traced. Of these 560 descendants, 310 died as paupers. 150 became criminals. 7 of them ended up as murderers. 100 were known to be drunkards. More than half the women were prostitutes. In all, the descendants cost the U.S. government $1.25 million 19th century dollars. Remember, their parents, their father and their great-grandfather and their great-grandmother were both atheists and godless and cared for nothing about morality. Then, on the other side, Jonathan Edwards was a contemporary of Max Jukes. He was a committed Christian, and he married a godly woman. Some 1,394 descendants were traced. Of these, 295 graduated from college, from whom 13 became college presidents and 65 became professors. 3 were elected as United States senators. 3 state governors and others sent as ministers to foreign countries. 30 were judges. 100 were lawyers. 1, the dean of an outstanding law school. 56 practiced as physicians. 1 was dean of a medical school. 75 became officers in the army and navy. 100 were known missionaries, preachers, and prominent authors. Another 80 held some form of public office, of whom 3 were mayors of large cities. 1 was the controller of U.S. Treasury, another vice president of the United States. Not one of the descendants of Jonathan Edwards was a liability to the government. This story was culled from Timothy Ofebu, Skeleton of the Ancestors, page 17. The story above is an example of course operating in the lives of descendants as a result of their background. Such stories and or experience, which some people claim actually that they do have, led to the birth of family deliverance or cleansing ministries around us, where pastors and deliverance ministers are invited to family compounds for prayers and all that it attracts. Of course, many authors around us have written on that. You may read people like Stephen Njoko, Robert de Grandis, John Hamskin, John Eckhart, and many others. These authors challenge conventional convictions that life is an existential cause and effect. But philosophically looked at, if the basis of this thought is true, causes or karma should have affected Western countries of today more than African countries, because, at least from evidence of history, the ancestors of the present Western world did more evil than the ancestors of the present Africans. For instance, the ancestors of the present Western world looted nations' natural resources. They looted nations' artifacts. They bought fellow human beings as slaves with unimaginable inhuman treatment. They instigated wars to service their interests, both political and economic interests. For instance, it is on record that Adolf Hitler led Germany between 1939 to 1945 to murder more than 6 million Jews in the Holocaust of the Second World War. Yet today, Germany is the richest country in Europe today. Descendants of those that ruled then, descendants of these evil ancestors of the Western world, are today living very comfortable lives, despite the sins of their forefathers. USA is the richest country in the world today, yet slaves were chained from Africa to America, and many were murdered, and those that survived suffered and worked to death. The descendants of slave owners and mass murderers are living normal lives today, rich with developed economies, politics, infrastructure. But someone theorized that though the West has all material prosperity, the evidence of evil past is not lacking. The West today is plunged into wars, into disasters, lack of family lives, to mention but a few. In the end, as I conclude, the doctrine of karma and reincarnation leaves us, one, with the idea that evil in the world is explained by actions, that one reaps what he sows. Of course, this we know is in the Bible, Galatians 3 verse 7, that one reaps what he sows, that every action has a consequence. Every good action has a reward. Every bad action has a punishment. Again, karma and reincarnation also tries to explain, as much as it could, tries to explain why some people's life are dotted with stories of suffering and pain, why others' lives seem to be dotted with stories of success, progress, and happiness. However, against this background of karma and reincarnation, it is not correct to erase the idea of cause and effect. We should always be aware that our future, our tomorrow, is the summation of the actions and inactions of today. That what tomorrow will be, according to existentialist philosophers, will not be determined by the actions of any other person, of government, of ancestors, of parents, of any other person, but by the quality of the choices we make today. And that is how karma and reincarnation, that is where it falls short. Because as already explained, it does appear that yes, actions have consequences as shown in our normal legal codes. People who go against the laws of the land are punished according to the offenses they committed. However, those who meticulously avoid contravening any of the rules don't get punished by any law. That shows us from empirical experience to this meta-empirical experience of karma and reincarnation, that every action has a consequence. Thank you very much for listening to this lecture. Raise your questions and we shall respond to it by the next class. Thank you very much.